How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Dungeon Man. It's, been quite a while since I've uploaded, and I can explain, I swear. It turns out, when you're relying entirely on the dank depths of Daemonheim for all your combat and skilling, it means that you often have to scrape and take every last bit of resources from each floor to make the best of an interesting situation. After over 100 runs or so, I've come to a conclusion that many other people probably have already come to. There's nothing to do down here. That, and also, despite it being introduced first, it really kind of feels like Iron Man has gotten set to the sidelines on RuneScape 3 compared to how much love it's gotten in the old school servers. This brings me to two big questions. Is it worth making this account an official Iron Man? And what should this account be limited to? This video is going to tackle the pros and cons of making changes in both of these departments. Firstly, addressing the status of Iron Man. For starters, it makes recording a nightmare, and requires me to leave Daemonheim anyway. As stated in another video, recording with the Orb of Oculus requires me to, well, have the Orb of Oculus. This is an item that's sold in Al-Kharid for 10 gold, and with the items I've gotten from the penguins, I've been able to just sell them at the local general store so that I don't have to get money from illicit activities. The first problem with this is that the orb disappears into Daemonheim's infinite abyss no matter what you do, so once you go down there, your gold is as good as spent. In addition to this, you're limited to what you can do while you're down there, as you can't really do activities or emotes while in the orb, to my knowledge. My plan was to make my OG account into a double so I could record down there with him, but then I remembered that you can't go down with non-Iron Man members. Duh. Which means my only opportunity to record the more cinematic shots would be if I had another account to go with my OG in order to record the one that looks like the double. Which is manageable, but does take a lot more time than if I could just do it with my Iron Man itself. Nextly, unlike in old school, lamps really aren't a thing to help train the offhand skills. There's stars in RuneScape 3 as well that are kind of like bad lamps, but to my knowledge neither of those are readily available for Iron Men. You can get Ottomans semi-regularly from the Yak Track or other daily quests, but you can't use those for stars or lamps within the store, which means some skills, like Slayer, are just stuck at 1, despite being one of the bigger issues that I have. I've even been softlocked by this before, albeit it's only happened once, but come on, look at this. I can see these stupid hands in my dreams. Thirdly, no sinkholes for Iron Men, which are dungeon-based content and technically accessible from Daemonheim. Even though it has to be done with others, to my knowledge, your rewards are mostly influenced by your performance plus some RNG. I mean, I really don't see what's so busted about sinkholes that makes them non-iron friendly. Like, imagine this. You're in old school RuneScape, and you find out that Iron Man can't use pest control because you could get carried in it. Since you could repair gates and barricades for points while everyone kills the rest of it. I'd argue that sinkholes are not even close to as important as pest control, but, you know, it is what it is. Fourthly, I'm having to budget an Ultimate Iron Man and limit my bank to 28 slots, taking everything out when I AFK at trees with my stupid little bronze hatchet. So at that point, really what all is the difference between budgeting the Iron Man-ish restrictions on the same account? Iron Man is already kind of ignored in the RS3 community. I mean, look at the main page for the restrictions. It still says that Dungeoneering is solo only, despite the fact that according to the wiki, that was changed back in 2022. Pros. I get this epic Iron Man title, and I get the little dumbbell right here, and I get to tell people that I'm an Iron Man. That's really the big one, is kind of like keeping the whole official nature of the account. And that's really where the biggest issue lies. It's just that Dungeoneering, and really everything related to this little peninsula, are kinda outdated. Minus the dig site, of course, but I can't really use that anyway. Add that onto the fact that the RS3 Iron Man restrictions are kinda odd when compared to the Iron Man restrictions in OSRS, and you'll have yourself a difficult time. On to the next question, which is what the limitations of the account should be. As of right now, I've only done the prerequisites for Herblore and visited Daemonheim itself, as well as its little adjacent peninsula. Another reason I've been struggling to get uploads is that, well, it's kinda hard to keep it fresh down here. Most of the floors kind of feel like palette and scenery swaps that are not really all that different than the 10 before it. Now, you can say that sounds like cope, which isn't totally false, but regardless, I would imagine it would get a little stale, at least from the viewing perspective. That being said, there's been a few things that I've been pondering about adding to the account options, but I wanted to at least pontificate publicly before I committed on anything. The exceptions that I've been thinking about tacking on: 1. Wilderness, flash events, mobs, etc. Oftentimes, there are enemies that have either escaped from Daemonheim's peninsula or have been sought out to be taken down from Daemonheim forces. I mean, the NPC you discuss it with is a Ramoki, and they're pretty ingrained with both Daemonheim and Dungeoneering. In addition, Daemonheim is located in level 12 Wilderness, so it's not that crazy of a stretch to get involved. It's kind of like I'm being deployed to somewhere in Gielinor as Daemonheim's bravest soldier. 2. Resource dungeons. So this one will be pairing with my third point, but you can technically reach resource dungeons without having to leave Daemonheim. Using the Hordestalker ring, you can teleport directly to resource dungeons, but only to the ones that you've manually unlocked. For some reason, you have to enter it from the outside at least one time before you can teleport to it with the ring. But with that being permitted, it does allow a whole bunch of extra options to help grind out the account. Hordestalker rings have a limited use, but they can be recharged with Dungeoneering tokens, which can also be done at Daemonheim. The only issue here being that to get the Hordestalker ring, I would need to do sinkholes. Speaking of which, 3. Sinkholes. This is for sure Daemonheim related content, but can't be done as an Iron Man. It seems fair enough in my eyes, as rewards are given out via score ranking, so I would need to contribute to actually get stuff done. This would also allow me to grind for the Hordestalker ring, which would allow me to teleport to resource dungeons directly, so I wouldn't have to do overworld travel. That is, of course, if you exclude, having to open it the first time. But in order to make that fair, I would limit myself to only being able to go into the resource dungeon if I could teleport from the ring, not just because I opened it the first time. While this does kind of go against the initial idea of doing everything entirely solo, it does open up a lot of options to vary what I can do without dropping into hard carry territory. Now, to be fair, none of these changes have been implemented. These are just speculation on ways to make this challenge a little less focused on exponentially resetting a list of floors. There are still some issues that this doesn't necessarily solve, but I think it might be a step in the right direction. There are still some skills that would be inaccessible, which is fine due to the fact that they won't really do anything in the dungeon anyway, such as necromancy, invention, archaeology, and construction, which is whatever. I could, in theory, buy a house and say that I had done it at the start like when I did Herblore, so that if I did get materials, I could work on construction, since there are construction doors in Dungeoneering, but that's a lot smaller of a point than the other 3 that I made. But I haven't just been pontificating on all of this, we've slowly and steadily been grinding deeper and deeper into the carcass that is the OG Daemonheim dungeon. We've even snagged our first agility level from nothing but agility doors, which was pretty exciting. The current plan of attack has been one of 2 things. If I want a skill, I do the floors normal and grind out everything that I can when it comes to resources and combat. Use whatever materials I get to make their final product, sell it all, and then determine a skill I want to train. I've updated my ring to allow for chances at more resources, which can be really helpful. In addition, my summoning is high enough to where I can make a Horde Bearer if I find a gold charm, and the cool thing about this is that as I grind the floor out, the Horde Bearer is generating extra materials. This even works when the floor is over and there isn't any combat left. So for example, if I find a floor with several planters, and I'm doing a lengthy farming Herblore run, it's still making some extra stuff which, while small, can be helpful over time. The other option is if I feel like I need to grind out some tokens, or I just want to knock out specifically combat or Dungeoneering experience, I just clap all the combat necessary, try to open all the doors I can, and then I bounce through the boss. The time difference between these different styles of run can vary between less than 10 minutes to 1.5 to 2 hours for a grindy one. This also varies based on the floor size, because at a quick small floor I've done as low as 3 minutes, and on a large floor where I tried to grind everything out solo, it took me 2.5 to 3 hours. The last large solo dungeon I did was a mess, though, so I've kind of been sticking to smalls and mediums. This is what the stats are looking like right now, which, as opposed to the last episode, isn't too bad. However, there still are some glaring issues. When it comes to enemies, there have been 2 big ones I've faced, one of them being the aforementioned hands that require 5 Slayer to kill, which is currently unattainable for me, and the other being ghosts. They're not like a huge problem, but I'd say that 90% of my few deaths I've had were at the hands of a high-level ghost early in the floor, paired with, I don't know, a guardian door. If you throw on some armor, grab some food, and grab the right weapon, you should be fine, but overall, they've been the only actual tough enemy I've encountered on the first few sets. So let's go ahead and recap, since there's been a lot to go over in this video. Right now, at a minimum, what I'm proposing to do is drop the iron, allowing myself sinkholes. With sinkholes being an option, that gives me the potential to snag some important sinkhole rewards, which, now that I'm on not iron, opens up the ability for XP lamps. With XP lamps comes Slayer, and with sinkholes comes resource dungeons, which allows for varied sources of training. Of the 21 resource dungeons, 5 of them are unavailable without quests, which is fine. The medium changes here don't really require me to leave Daemonheim-ish, as I can telly from sinkholes, and if I get the Hordestalker ring drop, I can teleport to the dungeons directly. Though, technically, I do have to go and open them for the first time, which is silly, but not really a huge setback in my opinion. The larger changes involve the introduction of the wilderness flash mobs, at least the ones related to Daemonheim, as some can be accounted as Daemonheim mobs breaking out into the wilderness and are being given out by the Wandering Ramoki, which is the Gorajo? Being the tribe that just dealt with Daemonheim, even though they're only really the co-host of the Wandering mobs, and this is also a little bit of a stretch via association, but, you know, it is what it is. I haven't settled on which, if any, changes I want to bring to the account, but my time here in the dungeons have certainly shown the age of this content. Those rose-tinted visions of a bustling lobby full of people rushing in and out of the different flavored floor rooms has been replaced with the overwhelming silence, accompanied by the occasional whistle of winter wind through the empty corridors. Side note here, for the first time in a while, Dungeoneering's actually received some small updates. November 6th, it's the most it's been done in a cool minute. Looking at it, I was curious as to if there was a reason for these changes, and I noticed that for the OSRS Game Jam, they talked about these procedurally generated islands being a potential minigame in the future, which they mention as to having a big influence from Dungeoneering, which I can't imagine is a coincidence as to them both going out at the same time, especially with how little RuneScape really cares about the OG Dungeoneering at this point, it seems. I would be stoked if this meant that, you know, the OG dungeon was getting a little bit more attention, but for now, we'll just take the small updates that we can and count that as a dub. In addition, right now it's currently double XP weekend, and as you can see, the Dungeoneering is getting a little bit of love. Got a couple people out here. It really shocked me when I got on and saw everyone here. Even if it is just for double XP weekend, it's nice to see this lobby a little bit fuller. All that being said, I'm not abandoning the grind for Dungeoneering. I'm just thinking of adding a few hors d'oeuvres to the main dish, so to speak. I'm certainly open for feedback or ideas if anybody has any. And I suppose I'll see you all in the next episode. Ciao.